welcome back to the Real You project. I've got my lovely wife Lara here because this subject, Talk 2, is part of a series of 4, which is this Talk 2, what it is about the battle of the mind. And a session on that is something that we call social self versus the essential self. And like I say, there's a lot of things that go on in us to be the real versions of ourselves, and we've been together for sort of over 10 years now, been married for 8, so we kind of like know each other, and it's been great to see how Lara has managed to take some of this stuff on board. And out of all the people that I spend sort of obviously the most amount of time with, I can tell that she's really got this essential self and social self sort of thing, mainly around the essential self, which will become clear as we talk. So that's the reason why Lara's here. We are obviously in lockdown, but as a couple we can be in the same room, so that's really quite cool, because the interviews that I'm doing at the moment are having to be on Zoom or something like that. So it's a real sort of pleasure, and it's much easier, I think, to be in the same room. We can crack on. So Lara, if you don't mind, like I say, you've really sort of seemed to have grasped the whole sort of social self versus the essential self. I think sort of before we started talking about this, you were more geared and controlled by the social you, version of you, and it's been quite an eye-opener, I think, for you to kind of get to know part of your real self. So the reason why I wanted to sort of talk about this, because you get it. So could you give us a little bit of a background on sort of like how you were before you got to know this, and where you were in your life in that sort of sense?
It's funny, I was saying, when you talk about the social self and essential self, I think probably for a large amount of my life, definitely a significant part of my life, I've probably been conscious about what people think of me, whether they'll like me or not. And I think that's what I kind of see as what your social self is you're changing who you think you should be in order to either not upset somebody, or just to be liked by people, or to be accepted by people. And I think most people who know me will say I'm strange, that I'm weird, I'm quirky, and those are parts of myself that I think up until maybe the last few years, definitely my 30s, I think I've been a lot more accepting of myself, but of the weirdness. But up until that point, I felt very uncomfortable in my own skin. I felt like I shouldn't really tell people what I like, what I didn't like. I shouldn't make the jokes I wanted to, shouldn't behave in the way that I usually do. Because that part of me, like I just wanted to be liked and accepted by people. I think as a child, especially at home, my family, I'd say I was much more my essential self. I was silly, I was making jokes, I was being a drama queen, not necessarily in the way that people would say a drama queen was these days, making a big deal about stuff. I just liked being a bit of an actress, putting on stuff, like dancing, like singing, like mucking around in the garden, things like that. But so when it came to being outside of my family circle, say, I found that like people would describe me as shy and quiet, because I didn't necessarily feel shy, but I felt like I shouldn't be that same person necessarily around them.
I think obviously knowing you, and you've done sort of like the Myers-Briggs sort of stuff, you know that you're an introvert as well. So I think sort of being an introvert is difficult when you go into a social circle, isn't it? And I think sort of mentioning introvert social circle, it's like then that comes with those constraints mindfully, doesn't it? And I think sort of interestingly, we mentioned as being a child, we're much more ourselves quite often when we're, like I say, in our own environment, if it's a good and healthy environment. And as a child, we're not being told not to do so many things as much. We're usually sort of more encouraged to do something, rather than, I think when we get older, it's like, oh, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. So,
I mean, I don't know if if this is part of your talk or not, if you've already talked about play or not, if that comes later, or if you do talk about it, but I know we've definitely talked about play and how important that is. And I think for me personally, I know play looks different as you're growing up, because play when you're a kid is, you might be role playing with my siblings or with your dolls or stuff, and that's what people consider play to be. But play as an adult could be like finding things out, making things, seeing if it works or not. It could be going on adventures. It could be all kinds, just trying things out basically. For me, it's about experimenting and play. And I think that's, for me, definitely that's a big part of my essential self, and trying to find out what my essential self was, because I think for a large part of my life, I think I could sense that I didn't really know who I was, I think, to know what my essential self was. And it wasn't until maybe I started thinking about who I was as a kid, or who am I on my own, when I'm doing the hoovering. I remember in the early days when you caught me hoovering and dancing around, for me, messing about is part of my personality. You know how silly I am at home, as do a lot of people who know me well and are close enough to me know I like messing around. But I think that's how I kind of figure out what my essential self is. Who am I on my own, or
Brilliant.
Who was I when I was a kid, or when I've been with people that I really trust, or even not everyone's their necessarily their essential self, or maybe they are when they're a little bit tipsy before they get wound.
Yeah.
When you've had a little bit to drink, a lot of people start to see my essential self coming out when I'm a little bit tipsy.
Yeah, I think when
not that I'm trying to encourage excessive drinking or anything.
No, but I think sort of when I do some sort of coaching and looking at life plan and seeing if we're in line with where we're heading, I often talk about sort of asking the question, what did you want to do when you were 5, when you were 10? Even sort of like in your teens, what would you like to have been? A lot of people sort of say, when I was 5, we really wanted to be an actress. And it's interesting that, again, sort of people's social constraints are. It's like, well, you won't be good enough to do that, and you won't be good enough to, and so we very quickly sort of put those on. So stepping back and having that time to think about how you were as a child, I think is really important. I think it's a great point that you've got there. So
yeah, I think as well, especially at the moment when we're in lockdown, when we've got this thing of essential services, haven't we? And some of us, some things are irking us at the moment, thinking, well, for me, that's essential. Going to the gardening centre, I mean, some of them are opening up now, but for some people say, well, that is part of my essentialness. Being almost locked down, you kind of think, well, what are the things that I need to do to survive, to keep myself sane? And for me, I've been baking loads of bread. I'm doing the things that I wouldn't necessarily have the time or the space to be able to do, because I've usually got my hands full of dog, which is also part of my essential self, being a dog lover. But I'm using my hands more, and I think being creative and using my hands is definitely a big part of my essential self. Doing the bits in the garden, making bread, making candles. There's so many things that I've got a list of things I want to be making, because for me that's a big part of
who you are, isn't it? Creativity plays a massive role.
So think about what are the things that you guys might be thinking are keeping you sane at the moment. What are things that you want to be doing? Maybe those things are the types of things that are part of your essential self that are keeping you sane at the moment. These are the things that are important to you.
Yeah, I think sort of at the moment in lockdown, I think we're probably getting more conscious of ourselves than ever before, because we're having time with ourselves. Whereas like sort of, I think in normal circumstances, we just get so busy doing the habitual sort of things, we don't actually spend enough time. What I'd like to sort of ask you, because I might forget, and that is that how does it make you feel being socially constrained? And more importantly, then going on to, because you have at times, and I think again, being an introvert, you tend to sort of allow yourself to be constrained by certainly sort of people around you. And I know that that's also sort of made you quiet in those areas, which then people think, oh, she's shy or she's snobby, and it's just because you're not because you're not sort of like able to just be yourself straight away. So what I want to sort of like hear from you really is, what does it feel like when you are your essential self? I mean, there's one of the things that I know that we discovered when we were in Spain on sort of holiday. You used to sort of swim and you used to love the backstroke, but then because of your shy, introverted self and sense of just, if you did that, people would be able to see you and you'd be able to see them looking at you, which wasn't very comfortable for you at that time. How did it feel to sort of be able to like just go and do that and be, because it was just, something maybe seems silly to people that are listening to this, that you would rather do maybe swim on your front so people didn't look at you than swim on your back, because that was a kind of exposing yourself. And yet when you did it, how did it make you feel?
It felt really freeing. I mean, I don't know why I keep forgetting about that example really. But yeah, it's like, I think swimming's one of the things that you do a lot as a kid, because I don't know if they still do in schools, but once a week you go as a class when you would have swimming lessons. And backstroke was the one that I got asked to do as part of a competition. Not that I was never been a strong swimmer. It's not like I could ever be an athletic swimmer, do competitions and things, but that was the one that I always felt the easiest with. And then as you get older, you don't really swim. Well, I never really went swimming or anything. And they said the only place you really see people swimming is, say, if you're going on holiday. You're in swimming pools in the sea and
you avoided it a little bit.
I avoided it. I avoided the pool, partly because I didn't like. I'm very self-conscious about my my physicalness anyway. But also because I knew I wasn't very good at doing the breaststroke or the front crawl. It wasn't I was always really, really slow, and everybody else doing it was just, they looked so serene. I was like, I can't do that like that. And I was like, why can't I can't do the backstroke? So I'll bump into people. People think, why is she doing the backstroke? No one does the backstroke. That's weird. But I mean, so the pool that we go to is quite a quiet one, isn't it? So it was quite nice, getting my confidence to actually, buy a swimming costume, and then going into the pool and choosing deliberately a quiet time to start with to help get my confidence up in doing it, because I couldn't remember if I could still do it or not, let alone stay in a straight line, But then when I actually did do it, it just felt so free, and it was nice to be able to do that exercise, and keep myself cool, and I'll just say it just felt freeing and nice.
There's just a couple of things where one, I think, sort of, where you've been quite funny about this, is when you do something that you feel like is your essential self, you get quite cheeky, don't you?
I get some excuse, saying, what are you doing that for? Just being my essential self.
And it makes you feel good. Now, do you think that also then helps you with, because you're quite naturally an introvert, we've mentioned that before, so not so much introvert, but also suffered quite a lot with low self-esteem. Has it helped you, knowing there's a bit more about you, has it helped you grow in confidence?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I think about the times where I've been my most depressed, from when I first became I wasn't aware of it at the time. It's only by looking back that you realise, I was depressed, because it wasn't really talked about as much. But I think from definitely the age of 14, maybe even younger, secondary school years was when I first started getting depressed. And it kind of grew from there into like teenagehood, and then through my adult years as well. Because feeling socially constrained by, when I say not having friends, because I'm moving schools to somewhere places that being surrounded by people I didn't know, having to make new friends as an introvert is really, really daunting. And then not feeling like you fitted in, people calling you a dweeb, trying to
just
avoid
being insecure, isn't it?
Yeah, being insecure and
lets people control you.
And not being able to be my essential self because you're not in the right environment with the right people that will accept you, makes you feel very depressed when you can't be your essential self. you feel frustrated because you know that there's something in you that you want people to know, but you're also very protective and defensive of it. So after a while, it just festers, that feeling, and it just becomes a numbness, and you just feel like you die inside, like any plant. You know, I've been doing a lot of gardening at the moment. Put the plant in the wrong environment.
Yeah, we've been talking about environment.
It will die. You know, it has that potential for life, but then it's just like, but I'm not in the right environment, so it just becomes numb, and it eventually dies. And I think that's what I felt was happening inside of me.
That's brilliant, because I think with that is like one of the things I've been talking about in the talks is that one of the reasons for doing the Real You project was seeing people getting older and not doing an older life sort of well, and I think that kind of not being themselves has made them sort of like bitter and angry, and so
I think a lot of, I mean, I was thinking about this on the way, and you know, there's a lot of, I think, you know, there's a language that people give themselves, say, well, I shouldn't be doing this because of my age, or because of I'm a Christian, or I'm a vegan, or whatever it is, whatever labels you've given yourself or groups you put yourself in. Sometimes you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this because it doesn't line up with this, but you know, I really want to. And I think there's always a thing when you're growing up, I shouldn't be doing this because I'm nearly 40, I shouldn't be wearing this, or I shouldn't be behaving like this, I should be becoming more mature. So why? You know, why do that? And it's not. And being your essential self isn't saying don't grow up, don't mature, because you do. But when you think about who you are as a person, you're aware that there's a core in you that's the same throughout your whole life. Your essence is always there. Doesn't mean that you're always mature, that you're always a child, like that you always think like a child. But there's a core there that's always the same.
Yeah.
And it's
that word essence, you know, I think sort of for a lot of people, their real true belief essence is either been taken away from them or certainly knocked down a peg or two. And I think sort of, how does it feel when you're being encouraged into being you?
Well, it's lovely because you feel like you can, this person, you know, because you get the encouragement through, you know, by showing a little bit of yourself. That's what I tend to do, test somebody. Go into a new, say, what do you think, you know, I'll make a little joke or do something a little bit quirky and said, oh, does that person enjoy it? Or are they like, you know, and I think and I think, say, and then the more you expose of yourself, you know, the more that you feel encouraged then to be yourself, and that grows, and you start to think, well, actually, that's me. You discover more of your essential self as you kind of go on and encourage yourself when you're, say, in the right environment.
That's wonderful, because I think also that does bring other people joy. I know it brings me great joy when I know that you've tapped into that essential self sort of mode. I know that sometimes I tease and say like, you know, packing it a little bit, but you know, it's really, you know, it's heartwarming for me, and I think for us to do life better, we need to encourage more of people being themselves, and that's kind of like, you know, what the Real You project's all about. So I want to sort of I want to just tie this up a little bit, because we've probably been chatting for longer than we probably think. Just sort of if you could just give maybe anybody any advice, or just, I think it's more just keeping sustained. Like, how does it feel to not be as socially constrained and mean more about being you? How does that manifest in you and in your life?
Apart from the things that I've already said, I'm trying to think.
Is life better?
It's definitely better. And I think, you know, when it comes to like giving advice, I think some of the mindsets that I had to have, you know, the first decisions that I had to make were perceiving in myself that I'm accepting of other people being themselves. So why am I stopping myself from action? Because I accept people as themselves. So why am I not accepting myself as myself? I'm
not going to lose this, because this is, you just something I wanted to pick up on with, is giving yourself permission.
Yeah. And it's not about being selfish, because some people can use "I'm just being myself" as an excuse to be selfish or be harmful to people. But that's not what it's about. It's just about being your character, and part of my character is being, I don't know if you talk about the core values, it's about being aware of other people, being polite and considerate, being kind. So that, and finding the right times to make the joke. You know, you might have a joke that's really funny, but you know, is that person going to be offended? Sometimes that you do have to make that decision not to, but it's about giving yourself permission, trying things out. If you know, you might think, well, I've always wanted to try doing that, and try it. And if it doesn't, even if it doesn't work out, if you make some bread and it doesn't work properly, if it doesn't rise, but did you enjoy doing it? Keep trying it. Have fun, you know, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. It's about how does it feel to do those things.
How we deal with fear and how we deal with fear of failure. And I'm talking about sort of this in this last talk about sort of fear being false evidence appearing real, and I think it's just down to perspective. So we'll make a draw it a close, because like I say, we can talk about this for yonks, because it is our passion of being our sort of true self. So guys, go on, Tom.
I just hope it's helped. I feel like I've just waffled on a bit.
No, it'll be very helpful, because I know that, you know, when people see something, especially on video, I think you really get to see their inner selves. I think sort of something about camera and stuff like that. So thank you so much for agreeing this. I mean, it's hard for Lara to actually sort of do something like this, because again, like I say, there's a low self-esteem, there's a lots of other stuff that's going on in there, but one of the things that she knows now is that it is worth trying to at least try. So I want to encourage you guys to, let's say, be your true authentic selves. And like Lara said, you know, I probably watched this video more than once, probably 2 or 3 times, just to get sort of like some really key words out of this. Okay, so hopefully speak to you, and you'll be listening to talk 3, which Lara's actually sort of touched on, which is core values and other things around that. So this is all about building the real you. So you guys take care, love you lots, and we'll chat soon.